So in today's web dev tip, we're going to carry on with our header section, with our hero section, where the user is actually going to be generating a short URL. And what we're actually going to do in this tutorial is to create the strapline and also the button that the user is going to click to generate the actual short URL that they're going to use. So if we have a quick look at the design that we're working off, this kind of rough idea of how we want the site to look, we're just creating this sort of section here where we're going to be looking at putting some instructional text and then ultimately some kind of call to action, which is the button that we're going to be clicking just here. So not too complex, so we should be able to run through this pretty quickly today. So we've got our header here and we're just going to close that up. But inside of the hero section at the top of the page where we've got our background is where we want to overlay this text and button. So I'm just going to use a div element here. And just because we're just grouping these items together and it'll allow us to put any CSS classes on there as well if we want to kind of put any formatting as such. And I'll use a heading level 2 tag here, and we haven't actually got a H1 in there at the moment. We might want to maybe update our logo here if we're going to be using that as the kind of title of the page. So we could do that there. That's probably makes most sense for us at the moment. And then in this heading level 2 tag will be the strapline. So the text for the strapline, you can come up with anything that you like here. So we'll say something like create short URLs, maybe all in capitals there, to rickroll your friends. I think that's pretty short and to the point as to what the app is doing. That should just give a little bit of an indication as to what the whole point of the site actually is, if you haven't figured it out by the time you've landed on it. And the other thing we want to have in here is obviously a button. We don't need to put it inside of a form tag or anything because it's literally just going to be a button that will hook up with our JavaScript code to actually generate the short URL and display it on the page. So in here we just have some call to action text. So we'll say create rickroll. Maybe we'll just say create rickroll because that's essentially what we're doing. We're just creating this short URL which can be used to rickroll anyone that you pass it on to. So if we just save that and if we have a look at the contents on the page. Okay, so obviously we've got this markup in here as well, but it looks pretty untidy, pretty shocking at the moment. So we'll work on some styling to actually tidy that up. So let's just put a class on here. We'll give this a tag or a class, of strapline, and obviously the button will be inside that as well. So yeah, I think that kind of makes sense. Obviously, we could put something a bit more meaningful if there's more content inside of here. And let's go over to our styles here. And so we're in this section hero modifier here. Let's just close up the header there and just put it underneath here. So when we've got a class of strapline, we can apply some new rules. So the first thing we want to do is actually position this correctly. So we've got a few options. We could center it in the page. I think it might be nice to keep this line down the side here in a kind of container fashion. So what we'll do is we'll push this in here, this text and the button, and just make sure it lines up with the title, that logo class in the top left-hand corner. So I think we used a padding yesterday of 4 and 8. So we probably don't need to worry too much about the padding on the top, although that might just push it down a little bit from the menu bar as well. So we'll see how that looks. And then we'll target the H2 that's inside of here as well, inside of this div class. And the first thing we want to do is set the color to be white. And also the font size too. We want this to be pretty large really, so let's go for 3 rems to start off with and see what that looks like. And also the font weight as well. We want to ensure that that's quite bold. So if you remember when we imported the Google font, you see we've got a few options here. So we imported 400 and 700. So let's set the font weight as 700. So that'll give us a nice bold looking font. Okay, so that's the text sorted there when that reloads. Okay, so that's kind of good. Probably too much padding there and probably maybe want it a little bit larger. So we'll go 3.5 rems. And let's just knock down the padding on the top there, just so there is a little bit of space, but not too much. And probably the other thing as well I would say is that's nice big chunky text, but we don't want it to stretch across the whole of the page. We want to kind of keep it focused on the left-hand side. So we could set the width here, the overall width of what's available to us at 50%. And now that will kind of stack on top of each other. Still quite a lot of padding on the top and bottom. Let's just take that off completely. And let's set it to something like 66% across here. Oh, that's better. That's kind of what I was after, really. So if we go back to the design, you can see we've got something similar to this, where we've got the instructional text and then we've got the button directly underneath it. Okay, so let's go and check out this button, because that looks a bit rubbish the way it is at the moment. So we'll target the button inside of the strapline class. So first thing, let's add a bit of padding inside of there. Let's just say 1 rem on the top and bottom, and we'll put a bit more on the left and right. And we want to set a background color rather than having it white. We want something that stands out. So what kind of color do we pick? Well, we could come up with our own palette, but that's not something we've done as of yet so far. So let's take some inspiration from our design and see what colors they're using in here. So they've got a very orangey sort of theme at the top here. And then some of the screenshots down here are a bit more sort of purpley sort of colour. So what we could do is pick one of these colours. In fact, there's not much in here really to go on in terms of, it's a fairly flat design. I guess they have like stuck to like a kind of whitish button for their call to action here. I don't know if that would necessarily work with our, yeah, we can try it, we can see how it looks. So let's leave the background colour for the moment, because we've got nothing to work on in our design. Okay, actually it doesn't look too bad, it's not as bad as I thought it was. Maybe we could make the button a bit bigger and just move it away from the text to just give it a bit of definition. So I'm going to increase the padding on the left and right. I might also make this the font weight of that bold too. And we'll put a bit of margin top as well, just to, as I say, shift it down. Maybe 1 rem will be enough. Okay, it doesn't look too bad. Maybe what we could do is push down a bit further. Make the text all in uppercase, so text transform to be uppercase. You could obviously do this in the markup as well, it's up to you. And let's have a look one more time. Okay, yeah, that looks pretty good actually. So we don't really need to go and pick a colour. Got a good bit of definition just from the black and white. That's quite surprising. Okay, so the other thing I just want to do as well is just set the cursor to pointer, just to show that it is clickable. And we could add some hover effects as well, but they obviously don't work great on mobile. I think that should be enough. Maybe we'll come and revisit it before we finish off the project and see if there's any tweaks that we can make. So talking about mobile as well, we've probably got some work to do because we haven't really looked at that in the last lesson or so. So if we have a quick look, you can see that the layout completely breaks on mobile. So what we're going to be doing, we're actually in the next lesson going to set up the buttons call to action and that functionality, but we will come back in a few lessons time and work on the mobile design. I'm just leaving that for the moment just because I'm conscious that we need to do a menu, we need to do a hamburger menu, and that's just easier when we've got our JavaScript set up and running. So we will come back to that if you're worried about the way the mobile design looks. But now we've got our strapline and our call to action button set up. In the next lesson, what we can do is actually set up some event listeners for this button and actually generate those short URLs, and then we'll think about how to actually display that to the user on the page. But that's it for this tutorial. Make sure you stay tuned for more web dev tips.